Most people spend their entire lives trapped in a constant struggle for control. They wake up every morning believing that if they just try hard enough, if they plan carefully, if they follow all the rules, life will go exactly as they want it to. This, however, is one of the greatest illusions of the human mind. It is the root of suffering, anxiety, and ultimately insanity. The harder you try to control everything, the more you realize that control is nothing but an illusion. Take a moment to observe your own thoughts. Notice how they jump from one thing to another, never truly still. Notice how your mind constantly creates scenarios, worries about the future, and holds on to regrets from the past. This endless chatter in your head is the result of a deep-seated fear, the fear of uncertainty. You see, the mind wants to categorize, to define, to label everything. It wants to put the universe into a neat little box and say, this is how things should be. But the universe doesn't work that way. Life is unpredictable. It is vast, chaotic, and ever-changing. And the more you resist this truth, the more you suffer. Think of water. If you try to grab it tightly with your hands, it slips through your fingers. But if you relax and allow it to flow, it will naturally find its place. This is the nature of reality. The more you try to force things, the more they slip away from you. Yet, if you let go and simply flow with life, you find yourself in perfect harmony with the way things are. Most of us were conditioned from a young age to believe that we must fight against life to succeed. We are taught that we must struggle, that we must work tirelessly to shape the world according to our desires. But have you ever questioned this belief? Have you ever wondered why we were never taught to simply observe, to flow, to embrace the natural rhythm of existence? The truth is, fighting against life is what causes exhaustion. It is what leads people to stress, anxiety, and eventually a state of inner chaos. Imagine a man trying to push a river upstream. No matter how strong he is, no matter how determined, he will never succeed. The river will continue to flow as it always has. His efforts will only leave him exhausted and defeated. Now, imagine another man who simply allows himself to float, to be carried by the current. He moves effortlessly, without resistance. This is the difference between insanity. Insanity is trying to control what cannot be controlled. Sanity is accepting the flow of life as it is. But why is it so difficult for people to let go? The answer lies in the ego. The ego is that voice in your head that constantly tells you who you are, what you should do, and how the world should be. It thrives on control. It wants to be the master of reality, the ruler of existence. But the problem is, the ego is nothing more than a mental construct. It is an illusion. A collection of thoughts and memories that have convinced you that you are separate from everything else. And because of this illusion, people live in a constant state of struggle. The moment you begin to see through the illusion of the ego, everything changes. You start to realize that you are not separate from life, you are life. You are not a small, isolated being struggling to survive. You are the entire universe, experiencing itself through a temporary form. This realization is not something that can be understood intellectually. It must be experienced. It must be felt deeply, in the core of your being. Look at the world around you. Look at the trees, the sky, the waves of the ocean. They do not resist, they simply exist. They do not question whether they are doing the right thing, they simply follow the natural order of existence. The tree does not try to be a mountain, the ocean does not try to be a desert, everything simply is. And yet humans are the only beings who struggle against their own nature. People wake up every day worrying about things that have not even happened yet. They replay old memories, wishing they could change the past. They live in their heads, trapped in thoughts that have no reality. And in doing so, they miss the only thing that is real, the present moment. This moment right now is all that has ever existed, and all that will ever exist. Everything else is just a mental projection. If you truly want to free yourself from insanity, you must learn to surrender. But surrender does not mean giving up. It does not mean becoming passive. It means letting go of the illusion that you are in control. It means understanding that life is far greater, far more mysterious than your mind could ever comprehend. Consider a dancer. A great dancer does not rigidly plan every single step in advance. They do not fight against the rhythm of the music. They simply move effortlessly in harmony with the flow of sound. Life is the same. The people who suffer the most are the ones who resist the dance, who try to impose their own rigid structure onto something that was never meant to be controlled. But those who truly understand life, those who embrace the unknown, who flow with the natural movement of existence. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is that they need to have everything figured out in order to be happy. They believe that if they can just get the right job, find the right partner, or reach a certain level of success, then they will finally be at peace. But peace does not come from external circumstances. It comes from within. It comes from realizing that nothing has ever been missing, that everything you have been searching for has always been right here in this moment. Think about the happiest moments in your life. Were they moments of struggle? Moments of control? Or were they moments of complete presence where you were fully immersed in the experience? Maybe it was a time when you were laughing with a close friend, watching a sunset, or simply sitting in silence, feeling completely at ease. These moments of deep joy happen when you are not caught up in the mind, when you are not trapped in the illusion of control. They happen when you are simply being. The irony is, people spend their whole lives chasing happiness, not realizing that the very act of chasing is what keeps it out of reach. Happiness is not something to be attained, it is something to be realized. It is always here, always accessible, but it is buried under layers of thoughts, fears, and desires. The key to not going insane is simple. Stop trying to make everything fit into a perfect plan. Stop resisting the natural flow of things. Instead, laugh at the absurdity of it all. Dance with the chaos. Accept the unknown as a dear friend rather than something to fear. You do not have to struggle to exist. You do not have to fight to be worthy. You already are. Existence itself is proof that you belong, that you are part of something infinite, something beyond words. Let go. Breathe. Feel the weight of control lift from your shoulder, and in that moment you will see there was never anything to fear, there was never anything to fix, there was only this, only now, only life, unfolding exactly as it should. The mind is a restless entity, constantly seeking security in a world that is, by its very nature, uncertain. It clings to ideas, identities, and beliefs, constructing a sense of reality that feels safe and predictable. But this illusion of control is the very thing that leads to suffering. The harder one tries to grasp onto certainty, the more the mind spirals into anxiety, frustration, and confusion. This is the paradox of human existence. In attempting to avoid chaos, one inadvertently creates it. Most people live trapped inside their own thoughts, endlessly oscillating between the past and the future. They replay old regrets, wondering how things could have been different. They project themselves into the future, trying to anticipate every possible outcome. But in doing so, they forget the only thing that actually exists: the present moment. The mind is like a monkey, constantly jumping from branch to branch, never still. And unless one learns how to tame it, it will continue to create suffering. To understand how to escape this mental trap, one must first understand the nature of thought itself. Thoughts are not reality. They are like waves on the surface of the ocean, fleeting, ever-changing, and ultimately without substance. The problem arises when one begins to identify with these thoughts, believing that they define who they are. But just as the waves do not define the ocean, Thoughts do not define the self. Consider a person walking through a dense fog. They can see only a few feet ahead, and beyond that everything is obscured. This is how most people navigate life. They believe that what they can see, what they can think, is the full extent of reality. But in truth, reality extends far beyond the limited scope of the human mind. The more one tries to impose structure upon it, the more one becomes lost in illusion. Many people believe that in order to be happy, they must solve all of life's problems. They must find the perfect career, the perfect partner, the perfect plan for the future. But this is a never-ending game. Because the moment one problem is solved, another appears. Life does not provide a state of permanent resolution. It is a continuous unfolding, a constant movement. And the attempt to freeze it into something fixed and certain is what leads to suffering. This is why detachment is so important. Detachment does not mean becoming indifferent or unfeeling. It means understanding that clinging leads to suffering. When one clings to an idea, a belief, or an outcome, they set themselves up for disappointment, because everything in life is impermanent. Situations change, people change, and circumstances shift like sand in the wind. The more one tries to hold on to something, the more they suffer when it inevitably slips away. Imagine holding a butterfly in your hand. If you try to grasp it too tightly, you will crush it. But if you simply open your palm and let it rest there, it will remain for as long as it wishes, freely and naturally. This is the way one must approach life. Let things come and go without resistance. Do not try to own them, control them, or make them permanent. Simply observe, appreciate, and let them be. But how does one develop this detachment? The answer is awareness. Awareness is the key to breaking free from the prison of the mind. When one becomes aware of their thoughts, they begin to see them for what they truly are, passing clouds in the sky of consciousness. Instead of getting caught up in them, they can simply watch them arise and dissolve without attachment. Meditation is one of the most effective ways to cultivate this awareness. Meditation is not about forcing the mind to be silent. It is about observing it without judgment. It is about sitting quietly and watching as thoughts come and go, without getting caught up in their story. Over time, this practice reveals an essential truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. You are the vast open sky, not the passing clouds. Another way to cultivate detachment is to embrace uncertainty. Most people fear the unknown because they believe that security comes from having all the answers. But true freedom comes from realizing that you do not need to have everything figured out. You do not need to control every aspect of your life. The universe is far more intelligent than the human mind. It has been functioning perfectly for billions of years without your interference, so why not trust it? When you stop trying to force life to fit into your expectations, you allow it to unfold naturally, and in doing so you free yourself from the anxiety that comes with constantly trying to control the uncontrollable. This is what it means to surrender, not to give up, but to let go of the illusion of control. Detachment also means understanding that nothing is inherently good or bad. It is the mind that assigns labels to things based on past conditioning. But in reality, everything is simply as it is. What seems like a disaster today may turn out to be a blessing tomorrow. What appears to be a loss may ultimately lead to something greater. When one stops resisting life and starts accepting it as it comes, they experience a profound sense of peace. Consider the story of a farmer who had a horse. One day the horse ran away. His neighbors came to him and said, "What bad luck?" The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A few days later the horse returned, bringing with it several wild horses. The neighbors said, "What great fortune!" Again the farmer replied, "Maybe." Then the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses and was thrown off, breaking his leg. The neighbors said, "What a terrible misfortune." The farmer simply said, "Maybe." A week later, soldiers came to the village to draft young men for war, but because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was spared. The neighbors said, "How fortunate." And once again the farmer replied, "Maybe." This story illustrates the nature of life. Nothing is inherently good or bad. It is all a matter of perspective. And that perspective is shaped by the mind, which is constantly judging and categorizing. But when one stops labeling everything and simply accepts things as they are, they free themselves from unnecessary suffering. One of the greatest realizations a person can have is that they are already complete. There is nothing missing. There is nothing they need to achieve or acquire to be whole. The idea that happiness is somewhere out there is one of the biggest illusions of the mind. True peace comes from within. It comes from realizing that the present moment is enough, exactly as it is. When one stops looking for happiness outside of themselves, they begin to experience it naturally. They begin to see beauty in the smallest things: a raindrop on a leaf, the laughter of a child, the feeling of the sun on their skin. They realize that joy is not something to be pursued, it is something to be allowed. This is what it means to not go insane. To stop struggling, to stop resisting, to stop trying to make life fit into a rigid mold. Instead, one simply flows with it, like a leaf floating down a river. They do not fight the current, they surrender to it. And in that surrender they find true freedom. The struggle with the mind is not external, it is entirely internal. Most people live in a state of constant conflict with themselves, trying to resist the natural flow of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. But this resistance is what creates suffering. The more one fights their own mind, the more tangled they become in its endless stream of thoughts. The key to peace is not in controlling the mind, but in understanding it. One of the biggest sources of mental distress is identification with thoughts. People assume that because a thought arises in their mind, it must be true. They take their thoughts personally, as if these fleeting, temporary ideas define who they are. But the reality is quite different. Thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky. They appear, they change shape, and they disappear. The sky itself remains untouched. Similarly, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. Imagine sitting by a river, watching leaves float past on the surface of the water. If you try to grab each leaf, analyze it, hold on to it, or push it away, you will quickly become exhausted. But if you simply observe the leaves, letting them pass without attachment, you remain at peace. The mind is the river, and thoughts are the leaves. The mistake most people make is trying to control the flow rather than allowing it to be. When you stop identifying with thoughts, you begin to see them for what they truly are, just mental activity. Some thoughts are helpful, some are unhelpful, but none of them define you. A fearful thought does not mean you are weak. A negative thought does not mean you are doomed. A passing judgment does not mean you are a bad person. They are just thoughts, arising and dissolving, like waves on the ocean. A person who learns to observe their thoughts without attachment gains an incredible sense of inner freedom. They no longer get caught up in unnecessary worries, anxieties, or self-criticism. They begin to understand that their mind is a tool, not a master. The mind is a powerful servant, but a terrible master. If left unchecked, it will create endless problems, replay old wounds, and anticipate disasters that may never come. But if one learns to use the mind consciously, it becomes an instrument for clarity, creativity, and peace. Another major obstacle people face is the illusion of control. Most people believe that if they think hard enough, plan carefully enough, and anticipate every possible problem, they can avoid all suffering. But life does not work this way. No amount of mental effort can stop change from happening. No amount of overthinking can guarantee certainty. The more one tries to control life, the more frustrated they become when things inevitably go differently than expected. Instead of trying to control everything, one must learn to trust. Not blind faith, but a deep, intuitive trust in the natural unfolding of life. The universe has been functioning perfectly for billions of years without human intervention. Planets move in their orbits, seasons change, and life continues to evolve. There is an intelligence far greater than the human mind at work, and when one stops resisting and starts aligning with this flow, life becomes effortless. Detachment does not mean disengagement, does not mean ignoring responsibilities or refusing to act. It means acting from a place of awareness rather than fear. When one is detached, they can fully engage with life without being overwhelmed by it. They can enjoy relationships without clinging to them. They can work toward goals without becoming obsessed with outcomes. They can experience emotions without being controlled by them. Consider the ocean. Vast, deep, and ever-changing. Waves rise and fall, storms come and go, yet the depths remain undisturbed. The surface may be chaotic, but deep down there is stillness. The mind, too, has its surface level, the constant chatter of thoughts, worries, and emotion. But beneath this, there is something deeper. A stillness. An awareness that remains untouched by the chaos above. Meditation is one way to access this deeper awareness. Many people misunderstand meditation as an effort to silence the mind. But the goal is not to stop thinking. It is to stop being controlled by thoughts. It is to create space between you and your mental activity. When you meditate, you do not force thoughts away, you simply observe them without reacting. And in doing so, you realize that thoughts are not the problem. Attachment to thoughts is the problem. This is why meditation is so transformative. It teaches the mind to slow down, to be present, to detach from unnecessary suffering. When one meditates regularly, they begin to experience life differently. Stress does not grip them as tightly. Negative emotions lose their power. They develop an inner space that allows them to respond rather than react. Another powerful practice is self-inquiry, asking, "Who am I?" Not in a superficial way, but as a deep exploration. Who is it that experiences thoughts? Who is it that feels emotions? Who is the observer behind all of this mental activity? When one looks deeply enough, they realize that their true nature is not the mind, not the body, but pure awareness. And once this realization dawns, life becomes much lighter. The reason people suffer so much is that they take life too seriously. They believe that everything is of ultimate importance. But in the grand scheme of things, most of what people worry about does not matter. The mind magnifies problems, turning small inconveniences into crises. But when one steps back and sees life from a broader perspective, they realize that most worries are insignificant. Alan Watts often spoke of life as a dance. There is no final destination, no ultimate point to reach. The purpose of a dance is not to get to the end. It is to enjoy each step. The same is true for life. If you are constantly trying to arrive at happiness, success, or security, you will always feel lacking. But if you learn to enjoy the moment, to embrace the uncertainty, to move with the rhythm of life, you will find joy in the process itself. Most people live as if happiness is always in the future. Once I get this job, then I will be happy. Once I find the right partner, then I will feel complete. Once I achieve my goals, then I can relax. But this is an illusion. Happiness is not in the future, it is only ever available in the present moment. And the only way to access it is to stop chasing it and start experiencing it right here, right now. So how does one avoid going insane in a world full of chaos, uncertainty, and suffering? By realizing that insanity comes from resistance. The mind struggles because it wants things to be different than they are. It wants certainty in an uncertain world. It wants permanence in a world of change. But once one stops resisting and starts embracing life as it is, suffering diminishes. Detachment does not mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging fully without being consumed by it. It means laughing at the absurdity of existence, dancing with the uncertainties, and embracing each moment as it comes. When one stops taking their thoughts so seriously, they gain an incredible sense of lightness. They no longer feel trapped by fear, stress, or anxiety. This is the true freedom. Not freedom from problems, but freedom from being disturbed by them. Not freedom from emotions, but freedom from being controlled by them. And this freedom is available to anyone who is willing to let go, to surrender, to trust in the unfolding of life. The key to mastering the mind and avoiding insanity in a chaotic world is not found in resistance, control, or suppression, but in detachment, understanding, and flow. Life, in its very essence, is unpredictable, ever-changing, and uncertain. The more one struggles against this reality, the more suffering they invite into their life. True peace does not come from manipulating external circumstances, but from developing an inner stillness, an ability to witness life without being consumed by it. Most people live under the illusion that they can control everything. They believe that with enough effort, planning, and thinking, they can prevent bad things from happening and ensure a life of ease and comfort. But life does not operate according to human desires. It has its own rhythm, its own unpredictable nature. The more one tries to force things to go their way, the more they suffer when things inevitably go differently than expected. Consider the ocean once again. It does not resist the waves, it flows with them. It does not fight the storm, it lets it pass. The mind must learn to do the same. When one stops resisting life and instead learns to move with its flow, they begin to experience a profound sense of peace. This does not mean passivity or inaction. It means acting with awareness rather than reacting from fear. It means engaging with the world without being bound by its ups and downs. One of the greatest obstacles to inner peace is attachment. People become attached to their identities, their beliefs, their emotions, their possessions, and their relationships. They believe that without these things they will be incomplete or lost. But attachment is a trap. It creates suffering because everything in life is impermanent. People change, circumstances shift, possessions fade, and even the strongest beliefs evolve over time. When one clings to what is temporary, they set themselves up for disappointment. Detachment, however, is not about rejecting life or withdrawing from experiences. It is about engaging fully while understanding that nothing is permanent. When one learns to love without attachment, they experience deeper and more genuine relationships. When they work toward goals without obsession, they find joy in the process rather than stress in the outcome. When they experience emotions without being controlled by them, they gain clarity and wisdom. Alan Watts often emphasized the idea that life is like a dance. There is no final point to reach, no ultimate destination. The purpose of the dance is to enjoy each step, to move with the rhythm, to be present in the movement itself. The mistake most people make is treating life as if it were a race, as if happiness is something to be achieved in the future, rather than something to be experienced in the present. A person caught in this illusion constantly postpones their joy. They tell themselves, "Once I get a better job, then I will be happy. Once I find the perfect partner, then I will feel complete. Once I have more money, then I can relax." But this mindset only leads to endless chasing, never arriving. True contentment is found not in the future, but in the present moment. To truly free the mind from suffering, one must understand that thoughts are not reality. They are simply mental events, passing clouds in the sky of consciousness. Most people take their thoughts too seriously. They believe that every fear, every worry, every negative thought is a reflection of truth. But the mind is not always reliable. It repeats old patterns, clings to fears, and distorts reality based on past conditioning. A thought is only as powerful as the attention one gives it. If you believe every negative thought that arises, you will be constantly anxious. But if you learn to observe thoughts without attachment, without judgment, they lose their grip on you. They come and go, but they do not disturb your inner peace. This is the essence of mindfulness, witnessing the mind without being controlled by it. One practical way to cultivate this detachment is through meditation. Contrary to popular belief, meditation is not about stopping thoughts. It is about changing one's relationship with thoughts. It is about creating space between the observer and the mental activity. When one meditates regularly, they begin to see thoughts for what they are, temporary, fleeting, and often irrelevant. They realize that they are not their thoughts, but the awareness that observes them. Another powerful tool is self-inquiry. Asking questions like, "Who am I?" or "Who is thinking this thought?" can lead to deep realizations. The more one investigates the nature of their own mind, the more they see that they are not limited to their thoughts, emotions, or even their personal history. They are something beyond all of this, a silent, unshaken presence that remains unchanged no matter what happens in life. This realization brings a profound sense of freedom. No longer bound by the fluctuations of the mind, one begins to experience life with a sense of ease. Stress no longer overwhelms them, because they understand that all situations are temporary. Fear loses its power, because they see that most fears are illusions created by the mind. Even suffering is reduced, because they stop identifying with pain and instead witness it as a passing experience. Another important aspect of mental peace is surrender. Not surrender in the sense of giving up, but surrender in the sense of accepting what is. Most suffering comes from the mind's refusal to accept reality. People resist change, fight against their emotions, and wish circumstances were different. But life unfolds as it will, not as one wishes. When one stops resisting and instead surrenders to the flow of life, they experience a deep inner peace. This is not to say that one should be passive. Action is still necessary, but action taken from a place of acceptance and awareness is far more powerful than action driven by fear and resistance. A person who accepts reality as it is can respond wisely rather than react impulsively. They can navigate challenges with grace rather than frustration. They can make decisions with clarity rather than confusion. Alan Watts spoke often about the idea of playing with life rather than struggling against it. He compared life to music. There is no goal but to enjoy the melody. A person who plays an instrument does not rush to the final note. They savor each sound. Similarly, in life there is no need to constantly strive for an imagined future. The joy is in the experience itself. To truly master the mind, one must learn to laugh at its absurdity. The mind creates so many unnecessary fears, so much unnecessary stress, but when one sees through the illusion, they can begin to take life lightly. They can laugh at their own worries, seeing them as part of the play of existence. They can embrace uncertainty, knowing that life is not meant to be controlled but experienced. In the end, the secret to not going insane is simple. Stop taking the mind so seriously. Observe it, understand it, but do not be ruled by it. Live fully, engage with life, but remain unattached. Trust in the natural flow of existence, surrender to what is, and embrace each moment as it comes. In doing so, you will find a freedom beyond anything the mind can imagine.